Going back into the swamp where I had found the commander, I took one good look at him and decided to think this through. For some reason I felt playful, and at a nearby site of grace, I began to consider my options. Realizing that the general had left a certain item in my possession, it only seemed logical to plan a trip back to the roundtable hold. The old and disgusting granny with no teeth and hollow eye sockets might know a thing or two about it. What the? Was that an enormous skull? What bizarrely gigantic creatures had lived here? It almost seemed as if this world had belonged to giants who walked the earth. Disturbed by this uncomfortable piece of knowledge, I traveled through space and time and found myself back in the stronghold. Here, I came upon the repulsive, hairy fingers, wavering ever so slightly as I reached the chamber. By the gods, I'd forgotten how hideous they were. Ignoring them, I turned to an equally obscene creature. Thankfully, the trip turned out to be worth the nausea, as the toothless lover of fleshy organisms of unknown origins revealed an imposing weapon. The great bow that had pierced me when I had originally entered the general's desert. That finely ornamented weapon looked glorious indeed. And would you know it? It was mine now. Oh my, this was going to be filthy. How could a weapon this magnificent feel both right and delightfully wrong at the same time? I carefully positioned myself in a devious way. However, the very second I took my first shot, I began to feel bad about the entire thing. I somehow felt judged by eyes from afar. Was I becoming paranoid? But even if fellow warriors had been witnessing such an approach to battle, and they weren't, no one in their right mind would ever be so arrogant as to condemn other warriors for doing whatever needed to be done. The notion was so nitwitted that I began to laugh. Finally, we began to exchange hurtful words and unpleasant bickering. Huh? Why couldn't I dodge anymore? Had I let myself go? Surely not. I hadn't become docile. I had merely overburdened myself with unnecessary gear. It didn't matter, though, because I still crushed his sturdy cage of withering organs. Would I ever feel the urge to wield another weapon? Right now, I doubted it, seeing as punishing evildoers with this glorious lump of hardened metal felt almost like making the beast with two backs. At least as close as possible in this world, strangely devoid of basic instincts as it was. What was the old man doing now? He tried to call for help, like a sobbing wench in need of a pair of strong arms. This was not too bad, especially considering that he, for some reason, wasn't able to summon his bothersome minions out here. Oh, they came after all. Alas, they arrived too late to save their crippled master. What followed was just outright curious. Just as predicted, I found that sought-after needle in the commander's possessions. Even so, it turned out that for some reason my fight against that ancient soldier, now resting with his men, was by far the most convenient part of my quest.
Now let me have a look at the needle.
Because after returning to the sage, he also needed time to study the treasure carefully.
Can you give me some time with this? As well made as it is, it won't be much use snapped in half, will it?
After hours of plain old mind-numbing boredom, he sent me back to the distressed damsel with the needle, now ready to work its miracles.
Will you give it to the girl, Millicent? I will reward you in kind. Millicent rests at the church atop the cliff beyond Celia.
But even that was easier said than done, as I had to turn on a couple of well-hidden braziers in order for an ancient and magical gate to open. Of course, the trouble didn't end there. Why was that, you ask? Well, because of huge balls of iron that had to be avoided. Who in their right mind devised such an obstacle? It was both juvenile and sadistic. This was getting tedious. Was she even worth all that trouble? Again? Really? Now that was just lazy. Finally, after so many difficulties and peculiar adventures, I was back at the ruinous church where I, what felt like a lifetime ago, had found a young woman, alone and suffering.
You ask that I stab myself with the needle to quell the scarlet rot. But how? Never mind. I've decided I would rather trust you than simply continue to spoil from within. Would you mind averting your eyes for a moment?
And doing so, I couldn't help but notice how appealing her voice really was.
Well, that was easier than expected. But why do I feel so?
She fainted, maybe from exhaustion, or perhaps even sheer excitement. If the old man was right, this could be her salvation. I decided to give her some time. Yet seeing her stand defiantly after my rest, I noticed a curious absence of relief in me.
I hoped to see you again. My apologies for when last we met. I fainted before I could even thank you. Everything is as you said. Since inserting the needle, the scarlet rot has ceased to writhe. Even the nightmares have abated. And now, though I can scarcely believe it myself, I can move as I please. Not that I could ever truly repay you, but I would like you to have this.
Giving me a valuable token as thanks, she was beginning to remember things from her past life.
I'm considering leaving. On a journey, with the needle buried in my flesh. I've started to recall, but dimly, my destiny. It's all thanks to you. My name is Millicent. I pray fate permits us.
And I bid her goodbye, expecting to feel something. Anything. Still, even as I had rescued that young woman from endless suffering and should have felt, well, joyful, I didn't experience any sort of happiness, not even relief. Because something remained off about this world. While preparing to resume my journey back to Limgrave, I once again felt on the verge of a terrible realization. Walking the empty streets of this once magnificent town of esoteric knowledge, one last time, I contemplated the loneliness, and it struck me. Even though these ruins were dead, haunted only by darkness and faint whispers, they weren't so different from the rest of the world. Even Limgrave, with its lush green hills, was slowly withering. Everything in that grassy land would disintegrate in time, just like this ancient center of learning, a center that could no longer hold. If, as my countless deaths had shown, there was no true dying in this gruesome world, then there was no dreading mortality. In other words, my suspicion back in Castle Morn had been accurate. This world was indeed hell, and we were being punished for all eternity, forced to rise at dawn and suffer demons terrorizing us. We were prisoners of our flesh, of this world, and we suffered again and again. Yet seeing as this inferno of torment also contained flickers of precious warmth,
The pleasure is mine.
a fragile sense of hope could maybe, just maybe, survive. As long as kind-hearted Alexander lived in this world of perpetual darkness, a faint glimmer would remain to guide the rest of us.